You know that old expression, no news is good news, or not a lot of news is good news? Good. Absolutely. First of all, I'm not going to have something horrific like in Boulder happening. That's good news. But also you can concentrate on the other stuff going on. So that's good as well. A little late to the live stream today because one of our social media platforms, hello X, hello, was acting funky today. But that's all right. We got it all straightened out. And if you're listening to the audio podcast later, you're like, I don't care. I'm listening to it right now on my own schedule. And good for you. And you can do that every single day. Post at about 9 a.m. Eastern Time. And then the Wicked Radio live stream on all the other platforms. It's all under the umbrella of Wicked Wisdom with Bill Adams, Facebook, YouTube, whatever the hell else is out there. You know where to find us. And thanks for all the new follows, by the way. Appreciate that so much. Here's another note. Make sure you put notifications on for when we do go live and when X is behaving, so when you know when the live stream is happening. So appreciate you so much. Back to work on a Tuesday that still feels like a Monday, but you know who else is back to work? Congress is back to work. That's right. They had another vacation. I know, everybody was mad. I was too. A vacation when we're trying to get these DOGE cuts implemented. We're trying to get all these things happening right now. And, well, what does Congress say? Oh, no, the chairs are empty. Yeah, another vacation. Little insight here, because I've interviewed over the radio years, part of my life, so many politicians. They would always make themselves available for interviews for, you know, their local districts and whatever it is. And a lot of them are still very fine people, but it's just the way that the system works. When they say go on vacation, we always tend to think of, yeah, family vacation, you know, and they're going somewhere, the heck knows, traveling abroad. A lot of the politicians, when they do these vacations, and the reason why the Speaker of the House, in this case, Mike Johnson, sends them on vacation so much, it's to go back to their districts and fundraise. The first things they'll tell you, and a new, especially a member of the House will tell you that's kind of new to politics, but just got elected. They say the first thing that's shocking that they learn when they kind of like go through orientation, you know, here's your office, here's what happens. First thing they tell you is, here's how you fundraise. As soon as you're elected into office, as soon as you put your hand on the Bible as a politician and a member of Congress, you start fundraising to get reelected. That's what they do with all these vacations. I'm sure some of it's family time, but shocked me too. But can you imagine that? You know, it's the pinnacle of your life. Maybe you're a business leader or a member of the military, and you get elected to Congress. The people in your home district like you. You get there, and then the leaders of your party say, "All right, now that we have you, you go back home and you get money out of those people." That's actually how it works, which is why the system is broken. But that's neither here nor there. Let's talk about them getting back to work. And we all know what we've been talking about. Did they listen? Did the pressure tactics work? Because they're, according to many of the people, especially in the House, and the senators, we heard from Rick Scott last week, and Brandon Gill in the House, he's a California congressman. They've heard from their people, us, a lot about these DOGE cuts. Because the big, beautiful bill, as Trump loves to call it, is still increased spending. So, but he has said, and others have said, that this isn't his final form. We were promised late last week that a lot of these cuts in a rescission bill were going to be coming back to the House to vote on. Is that true? Well, as of, over the weekend anyway, this guy, Russ Vought, I think his name is, it might be Voigt, he's not an elected politician, but he's the director of the Office of Management and Budget. Okay? What does he do? Well, he kind of controls all this stuff, and he kind of figures out, at least sells the idea of how much these cuts are going to actually be implemented. He says they're definitely going to Congress, and they will definitely be voted on once they're back from vacation, which should be today. Here he was yesterday.
I can. We'll be sending that up on Monday or Tuesday whenever the House is back in session. They will get our first rescissions bill. And again, this has been proposed, and we've talked about it. We want to make sure that Congress passes its first rescissions bill, including the DOGE, and we will send more if they pass it. And so this is the first one is foreign aid, USAID cuts, many of the waste and garbage that was funding, not only wasteful, but hurting our foreign policy, but also the Corporation for Public Broadcasting.
Isn't it funny, too? At the time, it was seen as such a controversial thing. No, don't cut NPR and PBS's budget. No, don't do that. The reason why it's top on the list, according to that guy, is, again, here's our theme, public pressure. So many people said, yes, get rid of that. Stop giving my tax money. Not the most amount of money and fraud and waste, but it's just so offensive to so many people, including me, that you're sending it to a literally state-sponsored media outlet that is completely biased and completely corrupt. That's why it pisses so many people off. But the foreign waste, USAID, let's see if they listen. The ultimate test. We'll see how much of this stuff. And the key important thing that guy said right there was, this is the first of many. But here's the takeaway. You feel like, you're mad at these politicians. They're on vacation again. They're not doing anything. They're not hearing our voices. Yes, they are. Remember, I've said it a million times now. Always go back to the no tax on tips idea. The public pressure, in the service industry in this case, kept the public pressure on these politicians, and you told them when they're back in their home districts, or they called, or they texted, or they emailed, or whatever it was, or they got on their social media and they said, get this done. So let's see if we had the same fortitude, if we still had the same balls to get the cuts that we want out of this budget, to get out of this debt spiral, and these DOGE cuts that everybody wanted and voted for. Let's see if they listened. Let's see. Today's a big day as they get back to work finally. Well, you've been working the whole time. All right, we got a couple of other stories to talk about today, too, including let's talk about cuts. In a couple of minutes, going to talk about a late-breaking story about massive cuts at the Disney Corporation. Not the most important story in the world, but it's interesting how they're hurting these days. And I want to get to egg prices in a second here, too. But here's another amazing thing. We'll get out of the serious news in just a second. Something incredible happened, actually all of last month, but they kind of kept it under wraps, which is the first thing I liked. But something incredible happened yesterday at a press conference in Massachusetts from the Massachusetts Attorney General. I don't just pay attention to it because I saw that, because that's where a lot of my family still is, and I pay attention to that news. That wasn't the case. This was a national story. Now, think of Massachusetts, right? I've talked about Mayor Wu before, city of Boston, who's basically a Marxist, an incompetent Marxist, which is an amazing thing to accomplish. She's awful. So you've got her, and you've got the governor, Maura Healey, who's done everything she possibly can to tell all of her local districts not to listen to ICE. And they've gone out of their way to tell illegal immigrants when ICE raids are coming, how to get around it. Here's legal. They've set up legal, get this, legal aid in Massachusetts, state-sponsored, so it's taxpayer-funded, to help the illegal aliens, in many cases criminal aliens, who have been let out on the streets, how to avoid ICE agents, and if they are caught up, free legal funding for them. Like, that's not a lot. Like, that's actually happening. That's how insanely corrupt and lunatic that state is. So it makes sense that ICE, the entire agency, in that district as it went to Massachusetts, last month kept a lot of things undercover as they raided up the criminal illegal aliens in that state. You ready for this? How much, though? Because we only found this out in the press conference yesterday. In the state of Massachusetts, ICE wrapped up and apprehended 1,461 illegal aliens. 1,461. They called it Operation Patriot. But you didn't hear about it because they had to keep it under wraps, because the state and the local mayors and everybody in that corrupt state government is fighting them on this every step of the way. So they had a big press conference today. And the Massachusetts Attorney General, her name escapes me right now, but she's amazing. So imagine being the top cop, the attorney general in that state, and she has to fight all of these people in the state government who are stopping her from prosecuting these cases. Imagine doing that job. So she gets up there and she talks about Operation Patriot and all the success and everything else that's happening there. And then this is great. The acting ICE director, his name is Todd Lyons. He gets up because he was pissed off. Not pissed off at the progress of Operation Patriot. He was pissed off at the media that was in the room. So they peppered this attorney general with all kinds of questions about, why didn't you tell us? Why didn't we know? Why do you have to do it undercover? Why? And she said exactly what I just did. Because this state and its elected officials, in a corrupt manner, are blocking the federal government from doing its job, the will of the people. That's why we had to keep this undercover. And then they found out something else. And then they didn't care about that. The press in the room, I guess it was some national press, but it was also mostly, Massachusetts and Boston media. Then they started peppering them about another certain thing, masks. That caught my attention. I said, why is ICE, the department, and masks, why is that trending? And you dig a little bit further and you look at it up. So the reporters in the room didn't care about all the arrests. They didn't want to find out about the stories about the illegal criminal aliens, like bad, violent criminals that were in that state and harbored because it's a sanctuary state and a bunch of sanctuary cities. It's like the people of Massachusetts are held hostage in that state. They didn't want to find out about that. They keyed in on one certain thing. Why did all these ICE agents wear masks during all these roundups? Why is that? And they kept harping on it and harping on it and harping on it. So, and this is long, but you got to hear the whole thing. The answer is a little bit horrifying, but his answer is great. I think because he was pissed off, and I enjoyed that. Acting ICE Director Todd Lyons wanted to take on the question about the ICE agents wearing masks, and why would they? Here he was. He says, I'm going to take on the mask question.
I'm going to answer the mask question. So, no, not the mask, the mask. So, a lot of agencies were invited to come out 2 weeks ago in Los Angeles where we ran an operation where ICE officers were doxxed. So let's just say that again. People are out there taking photos of the names, their faces, and posting them online with death threats to their family and themselves. So I'm sorry if people are offended by them wearing masks, but I'm not going to let my officers and agents go out there and put their lives on the line and their family on the line because people don't like what immigration enforcement is. They are wearing those masks because we ran an operation with the Secret Service where we arrested someone that was going online, taking their photos, posting their families, their kids' Instagram, their kids' Facebooks.
How horrifying is that, first of all? But there's another takeaway here. Can you imagine just doing your job? You're an officer, you're an agent for Immigration Customs Enforcement, and your family is threatened for you doing your job. Doing your job, which, by the way, reflects the will of the American people that voted for this. I mean, deportation was, and, safety on the streets, top 3 issue in this past election. And you've got these clueless Marxists out there saying, well, you shouldn't have that job. It's evil. It's all people are welcome. They're all welcome. Those are the people that will vote in the corrupt, for example, Massachusetts politicians, which allow crime to happen. That's exactly what it is. That's what's happening. So you can imagine doing your job and you're doxxed. Your family's threatened. So that's why they put the masks on. Now, I've asked the question for quite some time. Now that we're post-COVID and, masks are, they really are. They're hard to find. You don't find a lot of people wearing masks, except in one situation outside of the ICE issue. You find them in mass gatherings where people are covering their face masks, like the anti-Semitic pro-Hamas riots on college campuses. They were all masked up. Now, it's still a law on the books, a federal law, but it got pushed to the wayside during COVID because of a health concern, because of a pandemic. It is still illegal to mass gather, unless you're a government agent, in masks because you're hiding your identity and you can't be identified. That needs to be enforced again. In fact, this needs to be reversed for what we had during COVID. You should have to prove some sort of a medical ID if you have a mask, if you're wearing one in public in a group of 3 or more. You should have to be able to prove that because you got to enforce that again. Is the only reason why you are wearing that still is you're trying to hide your identity. Now, we'll get to that in a second. That's a law that's still on the books, okay? That is still here. They need to enforce that again. My own personal look and the way I look at the mask issue, and we'll get back to the ICE agents here in a second, is every time I see somebody, rarely alone in a car wearing a mask, is do this for yourself. Ask yourself, maybe they have somebody sick at home or they're immunocompromised themselves. Put the best foot forward and give them the benefit of the doubt. That's like my mindset when I see a group of people wearing masks, unless they're federal agents, like at a college campus riot, they're up to no good. That should be enforced. You go back to pre-COVID laws, and it's still a federal law in the books right now. You cannot mass gather in face masks because you're trying to hide your identity. Now, who would have thought that the end of the mask issue maybe would have come from the federal government for ICE agents? Because if left-wing reporters in Massachusetts are so upset about ICE agents wearing masks to not stop COVID, to hide their identities so that they don't get doxxed and their families threatened, look what's happened now. If ICE agents are wearing masks, we may have found the solution to getting left-wing rioters to stop wearing masks because they're anti-mask. Who would have thought that would have been the final ending? Not me, but maybe that's it. I don't know. Maybe that's why. So come full circle in their own undoing by them doxing and threatening the identities of ICE agents and their families. They may have ended the mask issue all by themselves. What a world. Oh, my God. I just enjoy that guy's response to it. I just love it. And he went on. I know it was long what we played there, but he went on at the end of the press conference and he just lambasted the media members in the room. He said, all you wanted to ask about were my ICE agents hiding their identities so their families aren't threatened. You didn't want to know about the criminals that they took off the streets in your state. You didn't want to know about the fine work they did, the progress they've made, and everything, and all this success. You just wanted to know about the masks. So he told them. So there you go. But you didn't hear about that. You didn't hear about the operation all month long. And it's not just a localized story up there. That's a national story because of the success they had. And I would bet if they kept 1,461 criminal illegal aliens and they took them off the streets in Massachusetts last month and didn't tell anybody, oh, I bet you it's happening in other states too. I bet you they're keeping that under wraps so that their operations aren't uncovered and their identities doxed, obviously. You didn't hear about that, and for good reason. Here's something else you're not hearing about. Let's get to the more fun stuff, and I love this story. If you look back to, oh boy, probably February of this year, what was the first news story that they said where the Trump administration is going to be a disaster? It's going to be absolutely awful. Well, look at your egg prices. Look at the price of eggs. In fact, I think Chucky Schumer said that, right? He was the big egg man. Senator Chuck Schumer, he was big on the eggs. Every week he was talking about the eggs. Prices of eggs are going through the roof. Trump, this is the Trump economy in a nutshell. You know what they're not talking about now? You know what nobody's talking about? Egg prices. Well, there was an update, and this just came out this morning. This is one of the reasons why I was a little bit late. Looks as though we're doing pretty well when it comes to eggs. Wait a minute, hold on a second. Could that be true? They told me that this is a sign of a sinking economy. We're headed towards a recession. Well, egg prices now have declined 62% since the inauguration in January. They were high, admittedly. They were, on average, this is a national average, $6.55. They're now $2.52 per dozen. So we've gone from $6.55 on the way to $7 for a carton to $2.52, which in my opinion is still a little bit too high, but still maybe that's another issue. But the takeaway here is the decline in egg prices. When all they wanted to talk about in the early part of 2025 was egg prices, the reason why you're not hearing it is it's good news for the American consumer. You can't find this story anywhere unless it's a federally issued story. So here's the takeaway. When you have pick any media outlet, any one of them, or politician, when they only want to talk about the bad news of a certain item or cost, but when that news gets better and they don't want to talk about it, they're completely full of shit. Don't believe them, because that's obviously propaganda, and they're obviously pushing that story out there until they can't anymore for a specific reason to take somebody down. And the egg prices are a great reminder of that. I mean, there's stories like that all the time, right? But the egg prices are just so beautiful because we all have eggs. We all either buy eggs if you're in the restaurant industry, or you eat eggs, or it's just one of those staples of the American diet so far. So when they won't talk about the egg prices being good, but they were all over it when they were bad, you know that story is complete propaganda. But forget Chucky Schumer and his he did whole press conferences on the egg prices. The eggs, Trump is taking your eggs away. He said something like that. All right, here's another story that actually, this is a little bit of business news that actually did make the mainstream media circuits, only because it's a publicly traded company. And I'm not here to celebrate this at all, because it's like anybody losing their job, it sucks. And there's a lot of really good people, really great artists, talented people that still work for the Disney Corporation. You may be mad at Disney about the overall message and all the woke crap and all that other stuff, but they're paying a price. Trust me on this one. And it's another example, though, of the public stepping up and saying, I don't like that product. I don't. And it took a long time, because Disney is just one of those American corporations, worldwide corporations, that's so ingrained into our culture now. for the American public and the American consumer to make a change on this, it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. You know, this isn't some fly-by-night company where people said, "Oh, I don't like them. I'm done with them." This is Disney. It's ingrained into family culture and trips. They have their hand into everything, into broadcasting, theme parks, movies, film. They're a big part of the culture. So for a pushback to happen to Disney, you know it's real. What am I talking about? You know, again, I'm not celebrating this. It's just interesting to point out. Disney laying off several hundred employees. Now, that's a big deal in their media division. Across its global operations, affected teams include film and TV, marketing, publicity, casting development, and corporate finance, too. Company says the cuts are aimed at improving operational efficiency. Well, sure they are. But it also means when you talk about hundreds of people, most of them making several $100,000, that's a big deal. And they had to report it because it's a publicly traded company. They kind of got caught into that woke mix where they push this stuff, and we've all seen it. We all know the story has been told a million different times about what they've been pushing for years now, right? Playing devil's advocate here, just defending Disney for a second. A lot of these, let's talk about films that they were producing. They were in production for many years. So they were coming out already. They already had budgets. They already had casting, and they were in production already. And they kind of had come out. They did come out. The true tale of the tape with Disney is going to see probably from this summer on. If they're still producing crap like this, what was it, Snow White, that was an absolute disaster? People claim that they ruined the Star Wars franchise with the wokeness and you know, the Avengers stuff. I totally get that. Here's the real takeaway, though. If you never think that you as a consumer can have an impact on a brand that's so ingrained in the American culture, don't think that, because you absolutely can. Something like Disney that's so closely tied to American culture, it takes a while, but it's happening now. I'm not celebrating the layoffs for Disney, but can you say they had it coming? Yeah, I think so. We'll see. We'll see if they turn things around and start producing things that actually the American culture likes. There's a lot of alternatives for media now. There's a lot of alternatives for entertainment, and I think the American family found that out pretty quick. So, not celebrating the cuts, just saying. All right, here's the takeaway. We'll see. We'll see if our public pressure, this will be the proof if our voices really matter, if Congress wakes up, gets back to work today, and they implement these DOGE cuts that we all want. And the other takeaway is, and this is the better one, with the egg prices, if a politician or a media outlet is jumping up and down celebrating the cost of something like eggs being so high, but then that cost goes down and the news gets better, but they're dead silent, they're full of crap. Don't ever trust them. And that's good. That's good, because we're getting smarter with this stuff. Thanks for finding me. I'm out of material. And you got to get to work as well. Not just you, Congress. We'll talk about it later on tomorrow. We'll see what these results are. In the meantime, the audio podcast will be posted about 9 a.m. Eastern time, right around there. It's usually available, all the audio podcast platforms. Thanks so much for the follows. And remember, put your notifications on for X when we go live for the live stream here. And look for Wicked Wisdom with Bill Adams and all the social media channels. Have a wicked awesome Tuesday. We'll get through this work week. Don't you worry about that. We'll talk to you tomorrow.